මෙන්න විශේෂ පුවතක්. අමරිකන් රාජ්‍ය ලේකම් ජෝන් කේරි මහතා මේ වන විට කොළඹදී විශේෂ ප්‍රකාශයක් සිදු කරනවා. අප දැන් ඒ වෙත යොමු වෙමු.
நன்றி கோஷிலா. விசேட செய்தி ஒன்று. அமெரிக்க ராஜாங்க செயலாளர் ஜோன் கெரி கொழும்பில் தற்போது விசேட உரையொன்றை நிகழ்த்தி கொண்டிருக்கிறார். அது தொடர்பான நேரடி காட்சிகளோடு நாங்கள் இணைந்து கொள்வோம்.
U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry is currently on a visit to Sri Lanka, is making a statement. Let's now cross over live to the visuals.
Now in all of this, some may think this goes without saying, but in too many parts of the world it doesn't. The women of Sri Lanka are playing a critical role and must. They are helping the needy and the displaced. They're encouraging people to build secure and prosperous neighborhoods. They're supporting ex-combatants and survivors of sexual and gender-based violence, and they're providing counseling and other social services. And these efforts are absolutely vital, and we should all support them. But we also have to do more than that. Here, as in every country, it's crystal clear that for any society to thrive, women have to be in full control. They have to be full participants in the economics and in the political life. There's no excuse in the 21st century for discrimination or violence against women. Not now and not ever. Now that brings me to the second area of possible cooperation on justice and accountability. Restoring your country's judiciary is a long-term undertaking that requires high standards for judicial independence, fairness, and due process under the law. Those reforms are often difficult to achieve anywhere. We're still working on some things in our system, believe me. You can see some of it on television. Not easy, but it is absolutely essential to be open and honest about trying to do it. Every citizen has a right to seek justice. And every citizen has a right to expect justice for victims of war crimes or crimes against humanity. They're painful issues, I know that. But if you try to compel people to simply forget the past and try to wipe it away, believe me, they will be more likely, not less, to cling to it. And if you tell them to forego justice under the law, they will be more likely to seek it outside of the law. It will be harder, not easier, to move forward as one country at peace. And that is why we hope your government will continue to cooperate with the United Nations as it explores the best way to mount a credible domestic investigation into allegations of human rights abuses, an investigation that meets international standards and at the same time, and most importantly, is legitimate in your eyes, in the eyes of the people here. The United States is prepared to furnish whatever legal, whatever technical assistance, whatever help we can to support Sri Lanka as it moves down this path. A third area where we can work together is the advancement of human rights here and around the world. The new government that you've elected is laser focused on establishing a strong reputation for your country on human rights. And the United States could not be more supportive of that goal. Until just recently, our diplomats routinely clashed with yours on these issues at the Human Rights Council in Geneva and the UN in New York. Now, with the new government, with the turning of this critical page, we have an opportunity to work together. But we also to continue to urge your government to release remaining political prisoners, and we would be pleased to assist in those efforts by sending a team of legal experts to advise on assessment and release, which is a critical component of the judgments that have to be made in that. And I say this fully mindful of the fact, believe me, no nation, including the United States, has a perfect record on human rights. We all have to do our best in order to improve. And I hope that the momentum that has been created in Sri Lanka will continue to build. And I'm confident that with the government you have and their commitments to me reiterated today, I have no doubt that you will. Now, a final challenge on which our two governments may be able to work together is the strengthening of democratic institutions. Here, you have a very strong foundation on which to build. Your former president reminded me today at lunch that you have the longest serving Supreme Court in all of Asia, that you have one of the oldest parliaments. You have this extraordinary foundation on which to build. We simply offer our support to help you in any way that we can on this effort of capacity building and the challenge of restoring the tradition that you have always had with respect to the fullness of your democracy. We want to help support you in the upcoming electoral processes. Timely elections will be yet another sign of the government following through on its commitments. Now, the people of Sri Lanka deserve extraordinary credit for the recent elections, and I want to congratulate all of you. They're quite remarkable. You turned out in huge numbers to exercise your rights. Every vote was a victory for your country. And you insisted on historic reforms, including the constitutional amendment that was just restoring the independence of the Electoral Commission. But hard work remains, my friends, including devolving power to the provinces. The United States stands ready to provide technical assistance to make it easier to implement these measures and to strengthen such critical institutions as the ministries and Parliament. We're also ready to help with asset recovery and the enforcement of anti-corruption rules. Our investigators are prepared to work with your investigators. Our prosecutors are prepared to work with your prosecutors. And we will commit that any stolen assets in the United States will be returned to their rightful owners. We've also seen in recent decades that free countries can learn from one another, and that to prosper they have to be prepared to help one another. And that is why I'm pleased to announce that our governments will launch a partnership dialogue to intensify our cooperation across the board. President Obama has nominated a new ambassador, and as a symbol of our renewed commitment to this relationship, I am happy to announce that we are going to build a new embassy compound. And our partnership dialogue and expanded bilateral assistance will help consolidate Sri Lanka's very impressive gains. We also want to do this in a spirit of friendship and of mutual respect. We're not doing this as part of any global countering or whatever. Make your choices. That's your right as independent people. But we appreciate and respect and admire the steps that have been taken by you to give yourself a government that wants to restore that democracy. And in any way that we can help, we stand ready to do so. So to sum up, Sri Lanka is at a pivotal moment. Peace has come, but true reconciliation will take time. Your institutions of governance are regaining strength, but further progress will have to be made. The United States will help when and where we can, and no part of this transition obviously will be easy, but if Sri Lanka keeps moving forward, I have every confidence that will take its rightful place of respect and of influence on the world stage. Sri Lankans should take enormous pride, I'm sure you do, in what has been happening within your borders. But every nation also has to look beyond its borders as well. For Sri Lankans, that's nothing new. Your country sits at the crossroads of Africa, South Asia, East Asia, and for centuries it served as a gateway for merchant ships. The Indian Ocean is the world's most important commercial highway. Today, 40% of all the seaborne oil passes through the Strait of Hormuz, and half of the world's merchant fleet capacity sails through the Straits of Malacca. And with its strategic location near deep water ports in India and Myanmar, Sri Lanka could serve as the fulcrum of a modern and dynamic Indo-Pacific region. The questions now are, how do we get there? And what role can the United States play in that journey? Well, let me answer that question by saying that we see our role partly as a leader because we have a strong economy and an ability to be able to project, but also we see our role as a convener, and most importantly, as a partner. The United States is already providing leadership in maritime security in the Indian Ocean in association with close friends and allies across the region, including India, Australia, Indonesia, and Japan. And that requires, in part, a focus on counter-piracy and counter-trafficking operations. It requires investments in humanitarian assistance and disaster relief so that the next big storm doesn't inflict catastrophic damage on coastal communities. The United States and Sri Lanka are also working together to oppose the use of intimidation or force to assert a territorial or maritime claim by anyone. And we reject any suggestion that freedom of navigation and overflight and other lawful uses of sea and airspace are somehow privileges granted by big states to small ones. They're not privileges, they're rights. And these principles bind all nations equally. And the recent decision by India, Myanmar, and Bangladesh to submit to binding arbitration, that's an example of how maritime claims can be resolved peacefully and through good faith negotiations. Now, I said convene also, as a convener. The United States is also a convener when it comes to promoting economic integration. South Asia is one of the globe's least economically integrated regions. Trade among its countries amounts to some 5% of total trade. And the cost of doing business across borders due to non-tariff barriers, import duties, and bottlenecks at border crossings is a huge impediment to growth. That is why the United States is promoting the Indo-Pacific Economic Corridor to connect South Asia to Southeast Asia and to spur sustainable development in both regions. IPEC will strengthen energy, transit, trade, and people-to-people ties on land and sea. And the challenge is, what's the pace going to be of this integration? If commerce across South Asia is going to become the economic driver that it ought to be, governments have to act with urgency, not settle for half measures or wait for the next country to go first. And we look forward to working with the Sri Lankan government as it increases trade and investment with its neighbors in the Indian Ocean and beyond. So the United States I've described as a leader and as a convener. Most importantly, though, I want to talk about being a partner. We're a partner on something like disaster relief, climate change, clean energy. Here in Sri Lanka, you lived through the devastating impact of the 2004 tsunami. And I'll never forget hearing that news. The images were absolutely extraordinary, gut-wrenching. Entire towns obliterated, raging waters sweeping away people's homes, hundreds of thousands killed and many more separated from families. And after the devastation, I'm proud to say the American people moved quickly and generously to provide relief. And I'm proud that the United States Marines were among the first responders in the recovery efforts, and USAID alone provided about $135 million of assistance, with many millions more coming from the American people's personal donations. The earthquake that caused the tsunami was unprecedented in its destructive impact. And as searing as the images from Kathmandu this week remind us, the nations of this region have to find common cause in enhancing the preparedness for natural disasters. But we also know that because of climate change, we're actually going to be facing more frequent and intense disasters across the board. I'm not drawing that out of thin air, and I hate to be the bearer of that kind of a warning, but it's the science that's telling us. The IPCC of the United Nations, the world scientists, and we're seeing the changes already in so many different places, including the Arctic that I visited the other day. So the United States stands ready to help respond and prevent climate change by leading the world towards a global agreement at the end of this year in Paris. Now, I can't tell you whether one storm, nobody can, or another storm specifically was caused by climate change. But I can tell you that scientists are telling us unequivocally that there will be more storms of greater intensity unless we stop and reverse course in what we are doing to send greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. Now, some people might shrug their shoulders and just say, well, you know, there's nothing that I can do about it. That's not true. There's something everybody can do about it. In fact, all of us know exactly what we have to do. The solution to climate change is a transformed energy policy. Just as climate change presents the United States and Sri Lanka and the region with a common threat, my friends, the need to develop secure and sustainable energy sources presents us with a remarkable shared opportunity. The greatest market in the history of humankind. It's an opportunity to make the right choices about conservation, about wind power, solar power, hydro, which you have significantly, about fuel and utility standards, about efficiency standards, about building codes, about transportation. And we can, with all of those things, reduce the emission of greenhouse gases and save ourselves, save the planet, literally, from the catastrophe that would be the unrestrained effect of climate change. Good energy solutions are good climate solutions. And the market represents a multi-trillion-dollar opportunity with 4 to 5 billion users around the world today. Just so you have a little comparison on that, the market of the 1990s that drove our economy to the greatest wealth creation since the early 1900s was a $1 trillion market, not multi-trillion, and it had 1 billion users. And that was the technology, communications market. The energy market is 6-7 trillion now and rising, maybe 9 by the mid part of the century. By 2040, investment in the energy sector is expected to reach nearly $20 trillion. That's a lot of money, my friends. That's a lot of jobs. So we want to see clean, accessible energy be the biggest slice of the economic pie. Now, of course, Sri Lanka is much more of a marketplace for clean energy. It is much more than simply a market to attract clean energy, and you know that, and I know that. It's a cultural model. It's a huge economic mosaic. It could well become, as you march down this road with the effectiveness you have been these days, a model for democracy and the restoration of democracy. It could show unity in remarkable ways for the region. We see even now, regrettably, that there are signs of troubling signs that democracy is under threat in the Maldives, where former President Nasheed has been imprisoned without due process. And that is an injustice that must be addressed soon. But Sri Lanka's story carries the promise that people can hold their government accountable, use peaceful dissent, use the power of the ballot box, and change the course of history. And we can already see here the power of that promise. We see it in the hard work of a Sinhalese mother who struggles to give her child a good education. We see it in the dignity that comes when a young Tamil man secures a job in which he can take pride. We see it in the common desire of all Sri Lankans to live in a safe neighborhood and a secure nation. We see it in the demand that leaders protect the rights of people and be responsive to the basic needs and aspirations. Those are the values that connect all of us across every boundary, no matter our history, no matter our background, no matter our beliefs and our creed. That's who we are. Now, I want to leave you with just one story of that kind of belief today. Karthika is from a Tamil Hindu family. When she was 14, the Tigers kidnapped her and sent her north to Jaffna. She was forced to carry a gun and move through the jungle. She was given barely enough food to survive. And in a firefight one day, bullets and shrapnel blinded her in one eye. For 11 years, Her family had no idea whether she was alive or dead. Eventually, Kartika escaped that hell by fleeing through areas of heavy fighting. She returned home. But in many ways, her struggle was only just beginning. She had limited education, limited skills, having spent more than half her life surrounded by war. She had few friends and even fewer prospects to find a job or even to start a life. After several false starts, Kartika found a USAID program in the eastern province that offered her a way out. She trained for months and learned the skills that she needed to get her a job in a new garment factory. She started earning an income, and she made an effort to befriend women from the Sinhalese community, something that would have been unimaginable for her just a few short years ago. Asked why she was able to find hope when others didn't, Kartika said very simply, "Now it has changed." My friends, everywhere there is an injustice, there are men and women who are ready to be the Kartikas of their moment. Men and women who survive a war that wrecks families and then build their own. Men and women who see what the worst of people can do and then dedicate their lives to finding the best in others. You've all borne the costs of war. It's now time for you to experience and hold on to the benefits of peace. Now it has changed is a claim that each and every one of you can make together. And I am certain that you will make that a proud claim, a badge of merit and honor and success that will be heard and seen by your neighbors and friends all across the globe. So thank you once again for welcoming me here. It's an honor for me to be here at this point in your history, and I can tell you that we will not walk away from our pledge to work with you to go together on this road and on this journey. Good luck to you all. Godspeed on the road ahead. Thank you.
அமெரிக்க ராஜாங்க செயலாளர் ஜான் கெரி கொழும்பில் தற்போது ஆற்றிய உரை தொடர்பான காட்சிகளோடு நாங்கள் இணைந்திருந்தோம். இது தொடர்பான மேலதிக தகவல்களை எமது 8 மணி பிரதான செய்திகளை எதிர்பாருங்கள். சாங்.
The proceedings that you just witnessed was a special statement made by U.S. Secretary of State John Keri, who is currently on an official visit in the island. Now, for details of this story and more, you can always tune into our weekend primetime news coming your way at 9 p.m.